Hello everyone, my name is PJ and this is my friend Tyler and welcome back to the VOIDCAST. I have used all of the cricket traps that I ordered on Amazon and I still have crickets outside. I don't know if you've heard them in my videos, I am trying to get rid of them.
Yeah, but they're out there. And, well, the cricket traps are meant for indoors, though.
They are, but I can't find any outdoor traps.
I don't understand how people have trouble with crickets inside. How would crickets even get inside?
Or scorpions. Because the same traps that I bought are for scorpions too.
Well, if we lived in not South America, but
Like Central America.
yeah, I mean, it would probably be more of a hazard. You know, crawling into the floorboards. I mean, I could totally see that happening.
Yeah, so today we're talking about more Dungeons and Dragons stuff, and we got another list of 3 topics, which I said last time when we ended up talking about 4 topics. How did that happen?
We were planning on doing something special today, but in our process of trying to get a green screen to replace this black backdrop, we would have some lighting issues still. Lighting! Why is lighting such an issue for video creators?
I mean, there's a reason they call the phrase lights, camera, action.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry I just broke the illusion, too, yeah.
I already told them about it
All right, okay, got it.
in my I'm Back video.
Right.
But also, I feel like you completely ignored my question.
Oh, how we got to 4?
Yes.
Well, I mean, I didn't ignore it. It just wasn't responding to it.
That's called ignoring it. Alright, so our first topic tonight is Darkvision. Darkvision has been a topic of heated debate ever since 5th edition came out, because they got rid of the other types of vision. Not like true sight or anything, but they got rid of infravision and low light vision.
And, well, improvision's been gone since, like, 2nd edition, so...
Oh, I'm just saying it's still gone.
Yeah.
So, like, now it's just you can see in the dark and you can't, are the 2 options now. And the options for characters that can see in the dark are, can you see 30 feet, 60 feet, 90 feet, 120 feet, 300 feet?
Well, isn't that the same thing as, like, having dark vision and low light vision, though?
No, because low light vision, honestly, low light vision was just difficult to rationalize. Because the idea was that people with low light vision could see in dim light, but not darkness. Whereas people with dark vision could see in dim light as though it were bright, just like people with low light vision, but then also darkness as though it were dim light, out to a certain radius. And that's still how dark vision works. And it still works the way that it's been in previous editions, where when you see in the darkness, you can only see in shades of gray, because there's no color, because there's no light. And they called it infravision back in the day because, well, that's how night vision typically works.
Well, kind of. Infravision was not seeing like a night vision goggles see, even though that's what typically it's called. Infravision was literally seeing heat signatures.
Oh, like actual heat?
Yes, you were seeing heat.
Oh, like those heat goggles you see in sci-fi movies?
Yes. And now I'll give a little bit of my history knowledge here. So infravision was seeing heat. Now, in the basic edition of the game, you saw high amounts of heat as gray. So you'd see high heat as gray, and anything else that was not hot would be seen as complete black. So you couldn't actually make it out. So all you could really see with infravision is living creatures or big areas of different distinct heat. They changed that later on with updates to first edition, where you could see movement patterns of air, which would reveal things like openings and passageways, the outlines of furniture and pieces of stuff in the area. But of course that was hard to rationalize because...
It also sounds really difficult to narrate.
Yeah.
Just saying,
Yeah.
okay, these 2 members of the party see things normally. The 2 of you see further than normal, and this is what you see. And then the other 2 of you see even further than that, and this is what you see.
Right. And then in basic and expert editions, they changed it to be you could see hot things as red and cold things as blue, which, whatever. I mean, barely a change. So honestly, them dropping infravision just for going for straight, I see good at night with my big eyeballs. That was much better move.
Yeah, so everything that had infravision and low light vision before now just has dark vision. And some things are hard to rationalize why they have dark vision, like elves. Like, typically creatures have dark vision because they spend most of their time awake at night or underground, or just generally they spend most of their time in the dark, so they evolved to have dark vision. Elves never did that. Drow did, but they have superior dark vision, at least currently. But regular elves, I feel like, shouldn't have that, except maybe they definitely would have had low light vision in older editions just because they spent a lot of time outdoors in the moonlight and not in like well-lit cities.
Because specifically, low light vision is supposed to be for like moonlight conditions. That's what it's meant for. So that's why it fits very well for those sort of characters that just live outside a lot.
Yeah, instead, now it's just lesser dark vision and better dark vision are the two types of dark vision that 5e uses. And then there's also the special dark vision that lets you see in magical darkness, which player characters typically don't get.
And that one weird vision you get for being a warlock or whatever.
That's what I'm talking about.
That's what you're talking about? Okay.
Yeah.
The packed vision or whatever.
And this has been brought up on occasion over the years, but I feel like it hasn't been brought up enough. People are still upset about dark vision. People feel like it's overpowered. And I'm here today to tell you that it's not. The first complaint that people have had about dark vision is that almost every race in the game gets it. And I did some counting earlier today, and I found out something. So I went to the list of all of the official 5th edition races. I didn't count sub-races, except for the Genasi, because the Genasi are a weird exception. So like all the different kinds of Dragonborn and Tieflings and humans and Dwarves and Gnomes and Elves, I didn't count them. I only counted core races.
Well, I'm glad you didn't count them, because otherwise you'd have a really artificially inflated number.
Right.
Especially with the amount of Tieflings.
Creatures with playable races with dark vision include Ozimar, Bugbear, Damper, Dwarf, Eladrin, Elf, Fire Genasi, Gnomes, Goblins, Hexbloods, Hobgoblins, Kobolds, Leonins, Orcs, Owlins, Plasmoids, Shifters, Tabaxi, Thri-Kreen, Tieflings, Triton, Yuan-Ti. And now I also left out template races, like a Reborn, which isn't really its own race. It's just like a template that you put onto an existing race, like human. And I also left out custom lineage and other things like that. Now I also am leaving out the DMG races, the races that are not meant to be player characters, like No and Kurotoa, but I still included them on this list just for numbers' sake.
Gnolls don't have dark vision?
No, they do. That's why they're on this list.
Okay.
Yeah, Gnolls, Kurotoa, Skeletons, Troglodytes, and Zombies are the races that are in the player DMG as NPC races. Yeah, but they all have dark vision. So the playable races that have dark vision, 22 of them. Right, and then the ones without dark vision include Aarakocra, Autognome, Centaurs, Changelings, Dragonborn, Fairies, Furbolgs, all Genasi except Fire Genasi, Gith, both kinds of Gith, Goliaths, Hadose, Halflings, Herangons, Humans, Kalistars, Kender, Kenku, Lizardfolk, Loxodon, Minotaur, Satyr, Turtle, Vidalcan, Verdant, and Warforged. 26. 4 more races don't have dark vision than ones that do. And even if you count the DMG NPC races, that's still 2 more races that don't have dark vision than do. So the majority of races actually don't have dark vision. I don't know where people are getting this complaint from.
I think it's probably coming from base races only. Because if we're looking at base races only, what are the numbers?
Base races only?
Mm-hmm.
Well, in the player's handbook, you've got humans that don't, dwarves that do, elves that do, gnomes that do, dragonborn that don't, tieflings that do, halflings that don't. I also didn't include half-elves and half-orcs. Is that all of them from the PHB?
Why didn't you include the halves?
Because they're getting dark vision from their elven and orcish ancestry.
Okay, fair enough. I think that's all the base races. But if you did include the half races, then they would have dark vision as well. But that's understandable.
Okay, so yeah, without including half-elf and half-orc, that's 4 with and 3 without. So only barely a majority of the races in the PHB have dark vision.
Fairies don't have dark vision?
Apparently not.
Okay.
You know what I think it was?
What?
A lot of these races that don't have dark vision are newer. I feel like when the dark vision complaints started, Wizards of the Coast heard them and decided to start making more races without dark vision.
Yeah, and instead giving them more ridiculous powers. Like, the Oh, well, I guess not really ridiculous. I am reminded though of the strange ability that Grung have, where they can jump super high, but they have no resistance to fall damage. So it's like break their legs.
Grung is missing from this list.
Oh, you don't have Grung on there?
I don't know why it's missing. You bringing it up made me realize that it's missing.
I
Why?
don't know if they have Darkvision or not.
Oh, it's because I don't have all the sources turned on. Because one Grung above is this weird free supplement.
Mm-hmm.
Same for Lokatha Rising. Okay, so let's just add Grung and Lokatha to the list real quick. Grung do not have Darkvision. And Lokatha, which looked cooler in older editions, do not have Darkvision. So that's even more without Darkvision.
I mean, yeah, it's very possible that over time they're like, yeah, maybe there's too many things with, and now we're actually kind of even. The numbers are pretty close, which I think is much better for most people.
Yeah, but the other reason that I want to bring up Darkvision is because people think that even if Darkvision isn't as common as they claim, it's also not as overpowered as they claim. I mean, too many DMs think that Darkvision just renders darkness moot, and they're not utilizing it properly, because they're not seeing in darkness as though it were bright light. The rules say they see in darkness as though it were dim light. That means it's still dim. That means everything in it is still lightly obscured. That means you have disadvantage on perception checks to see anything in there, making it easier for creatures in the darkness to sneak up on you. Yeah, you do still have disadvantage on seeing things in dim light, which it translates to a -5 penalty to your passive perception score, which is one of the few instances of the core mechanics using flat bonuses and penalties, is just to your passive scores when you have advantage and disadvantage, instead of rolling for them. And I believe that stacks with cover.
I believe it does. But that 5 penalty, though, is the important part, because it means that things are still fully capable of sneaking up on you very easily. The only way that really gets ignored to some extent is if you're being exceptionally sneaky and rolling for your perception checks. Well, not sneaky, but being very much perceptive, and you're like rolling for your perception checks every step. Which
Yeah, so if you're a creature in the dark, like if the PCs are in a dark hallway with murder holes, and the creatures in the darkness can have dark vision and they can see you just fine, if you fail your perception check to see them, then they can hide. And there are a lot of creatures in the game that can hide in dim light instead of, total concealment. And not only will they have advantage on their attacks against you, because they've succeeded in hiding, but when you try to attack back, they'll have 3/4 cover. So they get advantage on their attacks and a +5 bonus to AC. And Dark Vision doesn't help you overcome any of that.
it's strange to me that the idea of like the opposite of dark vision, that being like low sunlight sensitivity, because kind of the opposite, that they're like have pretty much completely done away with it.
Yeah, they're getting rid of sunlight sensitivity just because players are sick and tired of trying to come up with ways to overcome it. Like, oh, my drow wears sunglasses. Do sunglasses exist in D&D's setting? I don't care.
It's not even just that. It's the fact that it's hard enough to explain what sunlight sensitivity is, since they won't just say it's your eyes or it's
yeah.
your skin.
Yeah, that too. It just says when you're in sunlight.
Yeah.
Not when you can see sunlight.
Yeah, it should just be specified whether or not it's a vision thing, a body thing.
That means you still suffer the penalties even if you're permanently blinded.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
If your eyes are gouged out, the light still imposes penalties on you.
Yeah. I don't think they were ever a big fan of it, honestly. They were never really feeling it.
I mean, only like 2 creatures ever got it anyway.
Right.
Like drow and kobolds.
And even the creatures that do have it, well, I guess drow didn't have this ability, but kobolds had a direct ability to get over it just with pack tactics. I mean, effectively, when you're playing a kobold, is just, use that and get above your limitation or whatever. Which at least was a nice balance for it. Drow just got fucked. Nope, we're just always fucked over in the sun.
Yeah. And this isn't exactly in the rules, but I imagine it makes perfect sense that it should be. Dim light, or, seeing darkness as dim light, yes, it does impose disadvantage on perception checks, but I feel like it should impose disadvantage on anything involving sight. Perception, it does specify that it imposes disadvantage on perception checks related to sight, right? And not smell or hearing? Because darkness shouldn't do that.
Just sight.
Okay, just sight. Then that should also apply to investigation checks, which would make searching rooms more difficult. Having disadvantage on all those, having a -5 to your passive investigation, means you're going to be surprised by everything and not find any of what you're looking for. So, in general, creatures with dark vision are going to want lights, which is why you often see creatures like goblins and orcs who don't need light to see. They still have fires. They still have campfires and stuff.
Well, I mean, because fire also produces heat, which is very valuable to them in general.
Oh yeah, there's heat too.
But yes, I mean, even if you have dark vision, it's like if I took off my glasses. I can still see, but some stuff's harder to see.
Yeah.
So it's like, having the fire there is like, oh, well, I can at least can see you clearly now, which is a good benefit for them.
Also, I don't want to be a rules lawyer, but technically, the cold doesn't do shit to you unless it's 0 degrees or below.
Well, I think that for the most part, especially when you're talking about NPCs, it's different. Because they can have different stipulations than players do.
I suppose so. Like, the DM is free to make NPCs act realistically, even though the PCs don't. That's why occasionally you'll find the silly goblin in an outhouse taking a dump, which will be the only reference to feces in all of history. Why was there an outhouse? Maybe that one goblin built it so that he could take the first and only poo.
Well, the idea, right, is that stuff is there. You just don't focus on it. That's all it is. We're not going to sit here and be like every JRPG out there, which just happens to not include toilets in any of their houses. 7, for example, has what, 1 toilet? Pretty sure 7 only has the 1 toilet in the...
Those other toilets, I think the hotels have them.
I know there's some RPG out there, some JRPG in particular, that has 1 toilet in the entire game, and that's it. I don't remember which game it is exactly. It might be Chrono Trigger, it might be... I'm not really sure.
Have you ever played or heard of Franken RPG?
Franken RPG? No.
Oh, you gotta play that at some point. I want to watch you play it. Okay, but that's all I wanted to say about Dark Vision. It's not as common as people say, and it's not as broken as people say. So stop saying those things and stop complaining about it. Instead, use Dark Vision to your advantage. Make it a tool.
And if you don't like it, change it.
I guess. Alright, so that was fast. Next topic is crafting. And crafting is something that I did way too much research on a couple years ago when I was trying to design an original campaign setting for 5th edition. Not a totally new world. It's just an island. It's in the Forgotten Realms, but it can be anywhere. It's just this island. And the premise is that this island is full of dinosaurs and giant animals and dragons and lots of really powerful monsters that all just happen to be here. And your job as a humanoid race is to try and colonize the place. And before you can do that, you need to overcome nature. You need to, go out into the world, kill some dinosaurs without getting killed by dinosaurs, and take their bodies back and use their body parts, their skin, their scales, their bones, their flesh to eat, and crafting. It was going to be all about hunting and survival and crafting. So I had to do a lot of research on crafting, trying to make it make sense for this campaign idea that I had, which I'm going to talk more in detail about that in a separate video. But I have this ridiculously long article that I wrote. It's not even a complete article, it's just a list of crafting notes about crafting in 5th edition and my attempt at making sense of it. So here's what I've got. How do you go about crafting? Well, there's 2 ways actually. One is the player's handbook way, and the other is the Xanathar's way. Alright, crafting. So in the player's handbook, crafting is measured in days. And every day you can craft something whose value does not exceed 5 gold. Basically all it's saying is that you can craft up to 5 gold's worth of something in a day. And this is extrapolated on in Xanathars, where it instead divides it into work weeks. And that's going to be very confusing depending on the setting that you're playing in. Because even though Xanathars says that a week is 7 days,
which it isn't.
The fifth edition takes place in the Forgotten Realms, which uses the calendar of Harptos, which has 10-day weeks, called 10 days. That's also the setting that the Xanathar lives in.
Right, so why would he refer to it as human weeks? It makes no sense. Earth weeks.
7-day weeks.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it makes no sense. We're just going to assume that they meant 10-day weeks because, 5 to 50, whatever. Anyway, so the basic rules are pretty simple. You spend half of the total value of whatever you're trying to make in crafting materials and the amount of time needed to make it, which is the value of the item divided by 5 in days, or divided by 50 in weeks. You don't even have to make a skill check. You just have to be proficient in whatever tool you're using to craft it. And also actually have access to the materials, like being in an alchemy lab or in a blacksmith, having a forge. And once the time is up and once the money is spent, it's done. So crafting is appealing in a couple of ways. One, it makes sense that if you have the tools, you can make anything you want for half the cost. It just takes some in-game time. But the problem is that in-game time is something the players typically don't have a lot of. Because good adventures typically have a time limit of sorts. It's like the whole FF7 meteor hanging in the sky thing. Let's go breed several generations of giant emus while the world's in danger.
And primarily this comes from the design and focus mostly being on you finding things and not really crafting things. You can run adventures where there is tons of downtime. And I imagine, like, in earlier editions, it was much more common to have lots of downtime. It was built into, like, building fortresses for each class and all that sort of nonsense. So it was kind of built into the system more.
Yeah, it's a whole evolution thing, where in AD&D, you were expected to use the vast amounts of money that you got to build strongholds and have hirelings and all that stuff. And they've been struggling to figure out a use for gold ever since. There's still the options in the DMG to buy a stronghold or start a business and have hirelings and guards and armies and stuff.
But it doesn't really feel that great nowadays.
Players don't use it, not even the really high-level ones. They don't want to have a stronghold. I mean, typically adventures take place all over the world. Having a base that they have to keep coming back to, that they have to trust weak NPCs to defend, it's just asking for trouble. I mean, if they're going to be that high of a level, they might as well have another dimension where they live. And they can access any time.
And in earlier editions, the whole idea was that you were establishing a place in the world. You were building into the world more yourself, having a foothold. And then maybe if you die or make a new character, they might be a student or something of the place you built before or whatever. Or you leave a will to one of your compatriots. That's what the whole goal of it was, the idea.
Yeah, but there are a few more things about crafting. A lot more things, actually.
Oh, yes.
But the whole thing about only being able to craft 5 gold's worth of something a day, whether it's one object, multiple cheap objects, or just part of a bigger object, is that since there is no skill check involved, every single craftsman in the world is equally good. Mm-hmm. And equally as fast as crafting anything.
Maybe that's why art objects are like an actual commodity. Like not a commodity, but an actual...
A trade good.
A trade good.
Yeah, this is something else about art objects. They're technically a trade good, which means they buy and sell for the same price, which has an objective value that everybody in the world just knows. Mm-hmm. Like, they're not actually supposed to haggle the prices of gems and magic items, which is dumb. How is somebody supposed to know that a painting that a Knoll made, which is just their paw prints in different colors over and over, that he spent 4 weeks on, is going to be worth this much? I mean, from the fact that it took him exactly 4 weeks, that's how.
And they just somehow know that.
Yeah, they just know that. They can tell from looking at it, or appraising it.
I mean, I guess you could technically tell that from the age of the paint, as it layered up. You technically could like tell the age, but
That only works for paintings.
yeah.
You also can't really tell, like the list of art objects. We're going to talk about this later too in the third topic. The list of art objects in the Dungeon Master's Guide is so boring, so incredibly boring. I don't want another black cloak with silver lining, or another bronze crown, or another gold amulet with an emerald inside. Like, these mean nothing to me. They are money that looks different, and they're not fun. And what's worse is that if they are art objects, then that's really all they are. You're going to take them to a merchant. They're going to say, I know exactly what this is, how old it is, and how long it took to make. I will give you exactly this much money for it. Rules as written, that's how art objects work. And that's not fun, or realistic, or interesting. I feel like they really got away from art objects. I feel like art objects may have been a thing in older editions that they wanted to keep and didn't really care about themselves.
I know nothing about the existence of art objects in the previous editions.
I think they were in 4th edition. I think they were in the treasure hoard tables for 4th edition, but I do not remember.
Well, I do know that the experience you get from getting gold in the earlier editions, you don't get any experience for any valuable objects that are magical. I do know that.
I think that's just meant to incentivize players to not get rid of magic items. And also to make it so that they can't get really rich off of magic items that they don't want.
Yeah, but I didn't see any lists of anything like art objects, crowns, and stuff like that. But yeah, if you're doing art objects, just, be creative. He just mentioned the whole thing about like the Knoll paw print paint. That's cute. That's a neat idea.
Yeah, I'm gonna talk about that in the third topic once we get to it.
Mm-hmm.
So continuing on with crafting. So you can only craft a certain value per day, and it always takes you the same amount of time no matter how good you are. 3.5 did crafting way better. 3.5 actually had DCs that you can meet, and you made skill checks, and it multiplied the amount of time that you finished it by. 5th edition has something similar. It has rules for if 2 people who could individually do this by themselves if they wanted to. Only people who can do this can help. Multiple people can work on the same art object at once, or not just art object, but object, whatever you're crafting, and it will divide the time it takes by the number of people, but not the cost. The cost is always the same. The cost is always exactly half the value of whatever you're making, somehow. So, in the example here, a suit of plate armor, which has a market value of 1,500 gold, would normally take one person 300 days to craft by themselves. Again, no matter how good they are.
The whole 300 days for crafting a plate armor is so dumb. It's especially dumb just because of how infeasible it is for the world itself. Plate armor is not really that rare. People like town guards are going to be wearing it.
Oh, actually, I think town guards wear a chain.
You're telling me that they don't have, in times of war, they don't have people in the back burner readying the fucking weapons and banging on their plate mail? They're totally doing it.
They're probably busy making chain, which is somehow easier to make because it's cheaper.
Even though chain is significantly harder to craft. Because you have to make the individual rings and then put them into the circles and then stick them all together.
That's the problem, though. The 5th edition doesn't take the difficulty of what you're crafting into account. And actually, 3.5 had the same problem, because the DC for crafting plate was higher than the DC for crafting chain. But also, 2 items that were driving me crazy when I was doing all this crafting research were the flute and the great club. Because the flute is an expensive instrument, and the great club is a cheap block of wood. The great club has way more wood than the flute, but it takes the flute significantly more materials to make, because you spend half of its value in materials to craft it.
Well, maybe it's like the flute in Baldur's Gate 3, where it's like the size of your fucking body, but it isn't, right?
Well, I guess it would depend on its weight.
Yeah.
This is assuming, of course, that it's made of wood and nothing else.
Right.
The Great Club weighs 10 pounds. So after doing whatever it is you need to do to craft it, it's going to be 10 pounds worth of wood, and it only costs 2 silver.
That's the problem, though. The Great Club and the Club, they're just wood. The most that you're going to do is you're going to whittle down the handle.
And since it only costs 2 silver, that means you can spend the typical 2 gold and 5 silver per day to craft 25 of them in one day.
Well, that does make sense given that they are just sticks.
Yeah, they are just big blocks of wood, of course. But then you look at the instruments. Like a flute. A flute is worth 2 gold, but it only weighs 1 pound. It contains 1/10 the amount of wood of a great club. But you can only craft like 2 of those in a day.
Comparatively.
Yeah.
And because the crafting rules do not take into consideration things like weight or material. It doesn't really do that. It just cares about gold value.
Yeah, which is why I came up with the solution that when it says half its gold in materials, the materials are not all material. It's also research and like specific tools needed to like drill the holes into the flute and measure how far apart they need to be. Stuff like that.
Well, yeah, because you can't just put holes in a piece of wood and expect it to be a flute. And you need to have the angles correct and everything, yeah.
Yeah, so even after coming up with that solution of not all materials needing to be actual crafting materials, I still had more problems. Okay, some off-topic notes that I wrote just in the middle of this. It takes 2 days to craft 5 iron pots, which are worth 10 gold total and weigh 50 pounds. It takes 2 days to craft 100 iron spikes, which are worth 10 gold and weigh 50 pounds. So the weight of iron is consistent in these rules, which is why I was so convinced that they had a plan from the beginning. Like 50 pounds of pure iron is worth 5 gold. Those are the materials. So you spend 2.5 gold per day to make either of the above products. Everything there checks out mathematically. And what's more, because of the existence of bars of gold and bars of silver and stuff, that proves that absolutely nothing is lost in the smelting process. Usually stuff is lost when you melt it down, like scraps and bits and pieces. Not with gold and silver and iron and all that. 1 pound of solid gold is worth exactly the same as 1 pound of gold coins. Does that mean you can use 50 gold worth of raw materials, the solid gold, to forge 100 counterfeit gold coins? No, you cannot. Coins are the exception because they too are a trade good, like the gold bars. So they buy and sell for the same price just like coins do. Also, I have this note here that says that if any of my players attempted to make counterfeit coins by melting down bars of gold, I would start making them roll deception checks whenever they crafted the fake coins in order to see how well their forgeries are, how good their forgeries are. And then as soon as word gets out that there are counterfeit coins in circulation, every merchant they talk to will start making investigation checks in order to determine whether or not they're fake. That would scare the fuck out of them.
Well, wait, but the counterfeit coins are still made of gold.
Yeah, but they're still like printed with certain designs. Like you had to copy it. It'd be just like printing like counterfeit nickels in real life.
Well, hold on. Let me think about that, because gold is a trade good, which means that even if you produce that many coins, it doesn't matter whether it's correctly printed or not, because if you cut a piece...
I see what you mean.
Yeah.
Yeah, because... But then... Why do different cities have different types of gold coin?
Yeah, what's the point? Just to show that they were minted in the city, I suppose? But who cares? Just bring in a gold bar and have it cut down into pieces.
That's another thing. So if a bar of platinum is worth the same as 50 platinum, then why should merchants care if they've never heard of platinum coins?
Right.
it's still a piece of platinum.
Mm-hmm.
You know that it's worth 1/50th of a bar of platinum.
Yeah, because the coins aren't like made of like multiple materials. They're pure of that material.
Merchants in Dungeons and Dragons must be geniuses. Is there some kind of school that they go to learn all this shit?
I mean, there are mercantile guilds. Do they all have like 25 intelligence?
You know, they probably make a lot of use out of merchant skills to make sure that a piece of platinum actually does weigh 1/50th of a pound.
Mm-hmm.
So I know that that's worth 10 gold.
Right. Because you can't really easily fake weights.
Yeah.
Even with magic, you can't really fake weights too easily. I like how we found another issue just by talking about this.
Oh yeah, and okay, so we were talking about the campaign setting that I was coming up with, where you do like lots of crafting and stuff. Another thing I wanted to do was mining, because one of the rules for this setting is that everybody needs to have some kind of tool proficiency and get some kind of use out of it. Miners' tools don't actually exist, but I would add them into the setting so that people can go mining. And I was trying to figure out how ore works. Because if you're going to go mining, you need to figure out how much of what kind of ore they can get and how much it weighs and all that stuff. From the core crafting rules, we can easily assume that the ore for a type of metal will be worth half as much as the metal itself. Alright, so if you're going to get gold ore, half of which is rock, then if it's 2 pounds of ore, you melt that down, you get rid of the rock, and what you're left with is 1 pound of gold. So you cut the weight of it in half, and the ore itself, you have to say, is worth the same amount as the gold, even though it weighs twice as much? Or is it worth half as much as 1 pound of gold? Because right now it's just gold ore. How much is it, or what is it valued at?
Well, I don't think they make a distinction between like ore and the actual brick of gold. I think all they care about is the weight.
Yeah, but to get 1 pound worth of gold metal, you need 2 pounds worth of gold ore. Thus, 2 pounds of gold ore is worth 25 gold, which can be refined over the course of 10 days into 1 pound of gold metal, which is worth 50 gold.
Yeah. So yeah, you make less money by selling it in the ore form.
Yeah, so you have to smelt it down in order to make regular gold, and you earn more money that way. Just because you're not also selling people rocks, which reduces the value of the gold.
Well, again, the real smelting process for this sort of stuff isn't a half to half ratio. It's you get a chunk of it, and it might be like 10% gold and like 90% rock, or it might be 30% gold and 70% rock, and you have to kind of like even that out between what you're doing and what you're knocking away and stuff. It's not all consistently 50% in the real world terms.
Yeah, but then you also have to ask whether or not that also applies to uncut gems. Like, generally speaking, in the real world, a cut gem is worth more than an uncut gem.
Right.
Even though it's the same amount of gem, there's just rock on it too, and that's reducing its value.
Well, typically what's reducing the value is how accurately it's cut, because the cut of the gem, the artistry behind it is part of its value.
But the artistry is behind it? I thought it was the purity of the gem.
Oh, the purity of the gem matters too, but if you sell a pure gem that is uncut, it's going to be significantly less expensive than...
So are we making a distinction between cut gems, which are like art objects almost?
Yes.
And purified gems?
Well, what's a purified gem in your example?
You find a gem in a wall, like amethyst or whatever. You take it out and you get rid of all the stuff that isn't amethyst.
But you haven't like polished it or cut it yet. So you just have like a cleaned up gem that just isn't polished or cut, right?
Yes.
Okay. Sure. Why not?
Okay, but that's still not worth as much as a cut gem?
It wouldn't be, no. But then again, you have to put in more money into it to actually cut it. I mean, most likely you'd be selling the uncut gems to a cutter who would then cut it and then sell it for more money. That's typically what the process is.
Oh yeah, that's generally what like jewelers' tools are for.
Yeah.
I always think those were just for like making art objects out of jewels.
Well, no, I mean, like literally the art, the jewel itself is the art.
Which is probably why gems are trade goods. Just like art objects.
Yeah, because they are an art.
Okay, this is really
You
confusing.
you never thought about like that before? That
No.
cutting the gem itself was an art form?
No, I did not make a distinction between purified gems and cut gems.
I mean, because if you think about it, there's a reason why the typical gem is like the typical diamond is cut the way that it is for identification purpose. People know it's a fucking diamond.
Wait, the shapes are on purpose?
Yeah.
I thought that was like a natural thing.
No,
It naturally forms in that shape, like snowflakes.
no, they are purposely cut that way. All like a topaz is specifically cut like a specific way to identify it as a topaz. You can cut them in different ways, right? You can cut them differently, but they all have different names. All the cuts have different names.
Is that why emeralds always look like long octagons?
Yeah, it's just a very common way that emeralds are cut. Yes.
Okay, I learned something new.
Yeah, they don't grow like that naturally at all.
Did I never discuss my crafting thoughts with you before?
Oh, you have, but we didn't go into this stuff about gems. I assumed that this was pretty obvious information.
It's not.
Oh, okay.
Okay, well, that still doesn't help me figure out the mining rules. Like, I guess theoretically, it's pretty simple to just say that this type of ore is guarded by stronger monsters if it's more valuable.
If they fucking care about it, because again, most of the time an ore in a wall is not going to be that shiny, and shininess is usually a pretty important byproduct of what monsters want out of things. Shouldn't they be shiny?
But generally, there'll probably be like an NPC or something that gives them hints on where to find it.
Yeah.
And then they actually go mining and then they try to find it.
Well, then there's also the case that like most of it's going to be under the rock.
That's why they mine it.
Yeah. So most of the monsters aren't really going to be there to protect something they can't even see.
Yeah, but they should still be there anyway. Just so that the players can't get diamonds immediately.
Well, of course, game design wise, they're going to be there. Of course. I mean, it would be very poor design just to be like, oh, yeah, just you can go get like fucking blaze opals. Just go and get them. There's over there in the blaze opal fucking chamber.
I don't know if blaze opals are in D&D.
I don't even think they're a real gem. I was just saying something random.
You couldn't have just said a real gem.
Okay, fine. Like
ruby?
Yeah, ruby, fine. Just rubies.
Okay, so moving away from metals and gems and ore and mining.
Did we even come to any consensus there? It felt like all we did was just blather.
The consensus is that I have more research to do.
Okay, all right.
Okay, but the last thing that I wrote about, which I wrote a wall of text about, one thing that player characters in D&D who love to play as like rangers and hunters and stuff is skinning animals.
Yes.
Like one thing that NPCs typically do in these games is ask you to go bring them 4 wolf pelts. Mm-hmm. Not just for, leather and tanning and stuff, but also to prove that you killed the wolves. How much are hides worth?
Well, I mean, Into the Borderlands, not an official supplement, of course, but getting hides and stuff is just a typical, like, it's an art object option. I think it's like...
Don't make don't make them art objects. No. No.
They're because like a bear pelt's worth like 150 gold.
No, they can't be art objects, okay? Because you can make hide armor out of them, which is not an art object.
But that's what they do as a prize.
No, we're not
There's a guy in town who buys your bear pelts for full price instead of half price.
We're not considering Into the Borderlands. It is third party. Rather, the reprint is third party.
Yeah.
And the original was a different edition entirely.
Right.
We're not talking about Into the Borderlands.
Okay.
Okay, but here are my notes on skinning. So, hide armor and leather armor, they both cost 10 gold, but hide weighs twice as much.
Padding.
Well, the reason for this, I think, is that the animal skins used as the raw material for both items is stripped, tanned, and boiled in oil for the leather armor. So only half of its mass remains. But while the little bits of metal used for straps and buckles are indeterminable in cost, the fact remains that both are 95% animal skin. Since the leather loses half its mass in the refining process, we can assume that hide uses the full 20 pounds of mass. And since hide is worth 10 gold, half its materials would be 5 gold, weighing the same at 20 pounds. And that means animal hide is worth 2.5 silver per pound. But 5E's trade goods don't like dealing in fractions. And I think it's safe to say that an extra 5 copper is covering the cost of the metal buckles. So let's round that down to 2 silver per pound of animal skin. Even if it's worth more than that, we can assume 2 silver is the minimum. Now, after discerning that 1 pound of skin is worth 2 silver, the trick is determining how much animal hide you can skin off of an animal. A cow is 10 gold. A cow is a trade good in this game. Like goats and pigs and chickens. Assuming D&D cows weigh the same as they do in real life, because for some reason D&D never gives you weights for most things, like magic items especially, and even a lot of basic items in the game. Like right here, playing card set, weightless. But anyway, so assuming that they weigh the same they do in real life, which is about 1,200 pounds, typically only about 10% of any given creature's mass is usable, skinnable hide. So 120 pounds of one cow's skin would be valued at 24 gold, over twice the value of the cow itself. But that's if you're going to assume this to be the case and allow players to buy animals and kill them and skin them and sell the pelts for potentially more than what they paid. Then you also need to figure out the average weights of whatever your players decide to skin, be it rabbits, wolves, elephants, dinosaurs, or even humans. Because there's a lot of skinned humans in D&D.
Mm-hmm.
Like a 6-pound rabbit's skin would sell for 1 silver and 2 copper. A 120-pound wolf's pelt would sell for 2 gold and 4 silver. And an average human's 15 pounds of skin is worth 3 gold if you sell it to an evil wizard. Otherwise, it's worth a trip to prison. As a personal house rule, I wouldn't allow an animal's skin to exceed its market value. If a cow is worth 10 gold, then you can only skin a maximum of 10 gold's worth of hide from it, that being 50 pounds. Does that make sense?
I mean, for balance's sake, I think that makes perfect sense.
In fact, you can probably simplify this whole process by assigning weight limits to the skins of creatures based on their size categories.
Makes sense.
Tiny creatures give 2.5 pounds of skin. Small gives 5, medium is 10, large is 40, huge is 90, and gargantuan is at least 160. And if it sounds like this system would gyp the players by netting them less money from the cow than what they paid for, consider the fact that they can also sell the cow's meat. Cook's utensils are a crafting tool, and delicious culinary cuisine is something players can craft, kind of like ephemeral art objects. Unfortunately, all 5e tells us about is that the price of a chunk of meat is 3 silver. And there's no weight given. Or species. If we had a weight, that would make this easier, as it would suggest that all meat costs the same per pound. But since it's not listed, it's also possible that different meats have different values. You might get a larger chunk of pork for 3 silver than you would a chunk of beef for 3 silver, since beef is probably worth more just based on the prices of cows and pigs, right? Wrong. It gets more complicated, because it turns out there is a solution to the meat chunk equation. It lies in the daily lifestyle expenses. So the default assumption is that of all the lifestyles, modest is the most common. It only costs 1 gold a day to maintain this lifestyle, which has no downsides or notable benefits. This 1 gold piece covers all the daily cost of living, including the 5 silver needed for a room at the inn, which is listed separately on the food, drink, and lodging table. 5 silver for a night at the inn for a modest lifestyle. 3 silver for your meals, and 2 silver for miscellaneous things like fixing your clothes at the tailor or refilling your component pouch if you're a caster. The solution lies in the cost of a modest lifestyle's daily meals. Because it says right here, a meal per day for a modest lifestyle is 3 silver, which I just said. You know what else costs 3 silver? A chunk of meat. And you know how much food a medium creature needs to eat per day? 1 pound. Which means the meat chunk weighs 1 pound. At least 1 pound. But that also means that all meat types cost the same per pound. Or at least have the same minimum. It's like 1 pound of any kind of meat is 3 silver. Beef, pork, fish, displacer beast, and even human. Now that we know the cost of meat, we can figure out other things. But just to clarify, the menu items in Tasha's Cauldron of Everything are part of a puzzle, and they're most likely not an accurate representation of what their actual game prices would be. So we can't use that to help us unless we can somehow prove that they're accurate. And for them to be accurate, the cost of each item's ingredients would have to be exactly half of what's listed. Which, I have done the research on those items, and they make no sense. So we're not really going to get into those. They're just for the puzzle. You look deep in thought about something.
I'm trying to remember if there was actually a list of items of food. I think there is. Give me a second. All right? Give me a second.
Is this from Into the Borderlands?
No.
Candlekeep Mysteries?
Yeah. Well, it does say here about how there's a stall here called Hearth's Hot Drinks. You can get a cup of mulled wine or strong teas for 2 silver pieces each. So that's something for like drinks.
Wine?
Yeah.
It says right here a common pitcher of wine is 2 silver.
All right, so that matches. Okay.
Yes.
All right. Okay. I thought I remembered seeing something about food being sold in here. Maybe I was wrong. That may have been what I was thinking of. Is just that list there that just showed the hot cider. All right. My apologies.
Well, that's fine. Basically, bottom line is that crafting needs to be explained in more depth, like why you came up with the system. I mean, really, it's just they don't want to make it too complicated. They don't want to dissuade players from trying it. You're not really meant to think about it. You're just supposed to say, hey, I have a month of downtime, let's craft us some greatswords. But the great thing about crafting is that if you do have that time, and you do have proficiency in a tool, then there is no reason not to craft everything that you can with that tool. Because it's going to cost half as much, and you can make it look however you want.
Best to keep in mind that if you're going to use crafting by base rules without doing any modifications, you have that downtime pre-planned in there so that players can actually utilize it. Because that's kind of the biggest deal is like players will not utilize the time if it's not given to them.
Generally, the intent is that downtime takes place between adventures when there's not a plot for them to follow.
Right.
Yeah, so that's when you have all your time. That's when the world's not in danger. And that's when you can spend all of your time crafting. But crafting what? You don't know what the next plot hook is going to be. You just know that there's going to be another adventure. So it's kind of weird. It's kind of like this weird arc system for campaigns where you've got adventures, but they're not really connected in a significant way.
I think there's a reason why a lot of RPG design nowadays is built to be more, singular, direct to the point adventures, as opposed to being more open-ended things. It's just because it feels better for players to participate that way than to focus time on building their spot in the world that isn't really even going to be that permanent. I think that's what it comes down to. It feels better to go out there and like avenge your dead father. It feels less good to be like, this is my city, and this city is full of a bunch of people I don't give a shit about, but I gotta come here and protect it from orcs every 2 weeks.
One goal that I've never really seen among all the player characters that I have made or run for or played alongside of, nobody really has great aspirations. It's always personal goals. Nobody wants to rule the world or a kingdom or have their own castle or become king or anything like that. It's always small stuff. Like, I want to avenge my father. I want to find my father. I want to just go on adventures and I don't care what happens. I mean, probably the highest aspiration any of my characters have is Cam Weatherin, who wants eternal beauty. And it's a pretty high aspiration, but she doesn't want to rule the world or anything.
I mean, when you think about it, a lot of the most popular fantasy characters don't typically have that high of aspirations either. I mean, it's not like Luke Skywalker ever wanted to be anything but a fucking farm boy. Not until after he was born into not born, but shown the potential within him was he
Did he want that? I thought he hated being on the sand planet.
Well, what I'm saying is he didn't really have. I mean, I guess he somewhat dreamed about getting out there, I suppose. But I don't think he had any aspirations to like do anything that major out there just to get away from his family, more or less.
I'm not just talking about like fantasy RPG type settings though, or like sci-fi ones, like you said. Like if you think about it, there are a lot of heroes whose goal is to marry royalty,
Yeah,
and that effectively will make them royalty.
right. Oh, this can all be solved. Just play Shrek. Just be Shrek. That'll solve all your problems.
I mean, a lot of player characters basically are Shrek. Like, it is shocking how many player characters, like their goal is to stay at home, and something is preventing them from doing that.
I do enjoy you bringing that up, though. I think it's a very cool idea to go and try to go for, because I keep forgetting of what the original implication for D&D as a game even was. Where, again, it's supposed to be Conan the Barbarian style fantasy. You know, the desires of being royalty and just being strong and destroying your enemies, like that is the core potential stuff. The origins of D&D were about killing shit, getting money, and getting rich. That's what it was. And there's nothing wrong with having that sort of aspiration now.
Yeah, because the original goal of Dungeons and Dragons was to attain aristocracy.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that was the goal. It was unquestionably every player character's goal.
Well, yeah, because being a fucking peasant sucks. But being rich, is it any better? I mean, to an extent it is. You don't have to worry about food.
Yeah, and it's the players who evolved the game from there. Players who said, I don't give a shit about gold. I just want to go on an adventure. And Gary Gygax was just sitting in a corner in a fetal position, crying, like, why aren't people playing greedy motherfuckers?
Why
I don't understand.
why aren't people keeping track of time? Like one day to what was it, like one day outside of game is like one day in game? Like that's what it actually fucking was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll talk about AD&D at some point once I get the books.
Okay.
Yeah, but our third topic, which I alluded to earlier, is treasure hoards. Now, the normal rules for treasure hoards in D&D are that you're supposed to get so many treasure hoards per level. Like, for the first level, you're supposed to get, like, one treasure hoard. Yeah, it says, like, right here. Over the course of a typical campaign, a party finds treasure hoards amounting to 7 rolls on the challenge 0 to 4 table, 18 rolls on the challenge 5 to 10 table. These all relate to tiers, by the way. 12 rolls on 11 to 16, and 8 rolls on 17 plus. So by the time you are level 5, by the time you're done being levels 1, 2, 3, and 4, you will have earned 7 treasure hoards worth of gold, gems, art objects, and magic items. Which, you know, I equate that to 1 hoard at first level, and then 2 hoards per level after that, because first level doesn't last very long.
No.
Which, this actually brings me back to our discussion about challenge rating the other day. A lot of people seem to be under the impression that challenge rating doesn't account for player strength. It absolutely does, because only higher level creatures have immunity to things like non-magical weapons or resistance to them, and the treasure hoards are there to ensure that players get those sorts of things for their level. Like, stronger monsters are not supposed to be defeatable by level 1 PCs, even if they're completely restrained and the PCs can just start wailing on them.
What typically makes up a standard treasure hoard?
Well, it depends on the owner of the hoard.
Yeah, so this comes into quite like do they have a similar system to treasure ratings, determining like what draws certain kinds of treasure versus others?
What do you mean by treasure ratings?
It's a system from older editions where you like something might have a treasure rating of like B or C or D, and each one of those contains an option of what can be in that treasure hoard for them. Like priest, for example, in their treasure hoard option, they can only have scrolls, stuff like that.
Well, the way hoards work in this game is you have to figure out where the hoard comes from and how the players get it. Typically, the Horde belongs to a big boss monster, or it belongs to the quest giver, who rewards the players with it upon successful completion of the mission. Generally, it is the challenge rating of whoever owns the Horde that determines how big it is. So generally, players will get quests from stronger and stronger people, like up to like archmages and beyond, and their rewards will be challenge ratings based on their own, Hordes based on their own challenge rating and not the player's level.
Well, yeah, because if you're going to assume like money equals power, the more money you have, the stronger you are.
Precisely, because the stronger you are, the more money you can just go out and get from creatures that you can defeat.
Mm-hmm.
Like a level 1 PC can barely stand in a fight against a single orc, who will probably be holding like 14 silver, but then a level 18 wizard can just throw a few fireballs around and kill an entire army of orcs and get like 14,000 silver. Yeah, but a treasure hoard for challenge ratings 0 to 4. It's funny that it says challenge rating 0 to 4. What CR0 creature is going to have a horde?
What even are examples of CR0 creatures?
Frogs, seahorses, hyenas, technically. But there's actually two kinds of CR0 creatures. There are the kind that are worth 10 XP and the kind that are worth 0 XP.
What would be in a frog's horde? Eggs?
Well, technically, what would be in a frog's horde, if it had a horde, would be the same as what you would find in a Yethhound's horde, or an Orc Warchief's horde.
That's a very effective frog.
Yes.
Must have been for all the flies that he ate.
Yeah, but typically the way that you do hordes is you roll on these charts. So first you roll coins. You roll 6d6 times 100 for copper, 3d6 times 100 for silver, and 2d6 times 10 for gold. So no matter what, you're going to get a shit ton of copper from the lowest horde in the game.
Right.
And if you're using encumbrance rolls and keeping track of coin weight, you're probably not going to keep it. Probably going to dump it all in a river and say a prayer to Bahamut. After that, you roll a single D100, which, if you're really unlucky, you'll get absolutely nothing. apart from just the coins. But generally, you'll roll on one of these lines here, and that will determine how many gems or art objects you get. And this is the stupidest part of the treasure hoard design, is that you can never get both. It's always one or the other, gems or art objects. What is the logic behind that? It's like every single person in the world who keeps a hoard only prefers one or the other.
Which is definitely not true. I mean, even if we make the assumption, as I mentioned earlier, that gems are art objects, and we assume that maybe they only have, like, if they're working on an art object, it's really going to be the gems or something else. That's still not very... There's going to be someone in that group that's probably going to be interested in, like, painting pictures or carving stone figures. Not everyone's going to be a gem cutter. I mean, unless it was, like, a horde of, like, a bunch of dwarves or something. You know, maybe they'll have just a, you know... They'll have gem cutters kits. You know, they're all jewelers. Maybe.
Well, dwarves are also craftsmen. I imagine they still make jewelry.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, and then there's a 64% chance that you'll get a magic item from this table. And the magic item that you get is determined by a separate table. So like if you roll a 37, for example, it tells you to roll 1d6 times on magic item table A. Now, this table only lets you roll on certain magic item tables, and those tables restrict what kinds of magic items you can get at this level. Like, magic item table A only has the following on it: a potion of healing, a potion of climbing, a potion of greater healing, which is really difficult to get, 1% chance of getting a bag of holding, 1% chance of getting a drift globe, and then spell scrolls for cantrips, first level spells, and second level spells. All very weak, basic stuff. And 50% of that chance is getting a regular potion of healing, because they want you to get lots of potions of healing early on.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons why the crafting... I know this is a simple thing, to go back to crafting for a second. Why crafting potions became significantly easier in Xanathar's. because even Xanathar there's a statement in the book for Xanathar that says, like, potions are just so common they shouldn't take nearly as much time to craft, which is why they have separate rules for crafting potions that is faster.
Yeah, there's even a table listing all the different types of really common potions, like potions of climbing and potions of animal friendship, that are available for purchase, and they have given prices, which they do not in the DMG. In the DMG, it's just kind of expected that magic items have really nebulous prices, and you just cut it in half if it's a consumable, and that's it. Yeah, but so about 64% of the 64% of the treasure hoards that you get during first tier will have magic items. That's probably about 4 of the 7 hoards. So yeah, you're expected to get roughly 12 magic items by the time you're done with tier 1. So it does give you a few magic items, and it's going to be mostly potions of healing, but it allows tier 1 to be simple and low magic. Then you get to challenge rating 5 to 10, where the chances of getting magic items per horde shoots up to 72%. And then you start rolling on different tables. Like the tables from the first table are still here, A, B, C, F, and G, but now they also added H. And you get way more coins and way more art objects, etc., etc. The treasure hoard system is designed to make sure that players have the amount of money that it expects them to have, so that if they don't get the magic items they want, they can probably do a short quest to find someone that they can buy it from, find it themselves, or even craft it themselves. So the system assumes, and there's even another chart in Xanathar's that tells you what magic items, how many of what kind, players of a certain level should have, which is also helpful for making a new player character of a higher level. So challenge rating for monsters absolutely takes it into account. A monster, like a challenge rating 11 monster, is definitely going to be built under the assumption that whatever is fighting it, whatever is an even match for it, has tier 2 magic items in its possession. Because they've got how many hordes of that tier? Did it say? 18. Plus the 7 that you got from tier 1. So that's 25 treasure hoards. Now on average, it's about 3/4 of those have magic items in them.
Yeah.
Multiples.
And you're going to have, and after you've done all those, you're going to have 800 potions of healing. And that's all you'll ever get on every roll. You'll never get anything else. Maybe you'll have approximately 70 potions of healing, 1 potion of climbing, and a scroll of firebolt.
No, they wouldn't. They would have way better potions.
I don't know. Whenever I went into 5e tools and tried to roll treasures and stuff, like off of Hoards, I'd always get just shit like that. I'd never get anything interesting.
Well, what CR did you have it set to?
The mid one from like 5 to
10?
Yeah. I never got anything worthwhile from it.
Well, 5 to 10 is still relatively low. 5 to 10 is considered to be the best tier to play the game in. Just because you're not too weak and you're still not too strong. Yeah, but I don't really like the way that 5e does the treasure hoards because they're not very interesting. You have to choose between gems and art objects. The sample art objects that they give you are all boring shit, like I mentioned already. Like a box of turquoise animal figurines. I mean, if you just rolled that randomly and decided to stick it in the horde, the players are probably going to ask, why did they have that? Why did they keep it? Where did they get it? Where did it come from?
I mean, even if they killed somebody and took it, why the hell was that person carrying it?
Yeah, like there's no story behind it. It's just, it's money with a randomly generated name attached to it. It's a box. It might as well just be a box with a sticky note on the front that says, Legendary Dwarven Helmet. And then you open it up and it's just 500 gold. That's all they really are.
Yeah, but it's not too hard to make befitting treasures for areas and stuff. Art objects, I should say.
Which is why we're now going to get into how I do treasure hoards. Okay, so here we have the loot generator on 5e tools. So you have to set to the challenge rating of whatever's horde it is. Like if it's a goblin boss or an orc war chief or whatever, a null pacloid, then it'll probably be 0 to 4. If it's a beholder, it'll probably be like 11 to 16. If it's a lich, it'll be 17 plus. So we're just going to stick with 0 to 4 for now, since that's the level range that I've been working with. So we're going to make sure that treasure hoard is ticked, and then we roll the loot. Now, all of this stuff that I just rolled, I'm going to ignore almost all of it. The only things I care about are the magic items and the total gold's worth of coins, art objects, and gems. This number and what's down here. The only thing I do. Okay, so first thing I do is I look at the magic items. Potion of Poison. It's an uncommon magic item, and I look at it. It's like a trick item. It looks, smells, and tastes like a potion of healing, which that might be fun to just give to the players and tell them it's a potion of healing, and then they drink it and they realize it's poison. I'd probably put that in a hoard, especially if it's something that uses poison, like a null word or like a drow word. So I ask myself, do I want this in the hoard? And if the answer is yes, then I keep it. But even if it's not just something that I want to trick the players with, like I'll re-roll, like Potion of Greater Healing. That is absolutely something the players would want, so I keep it in the hoard. But I had to ask myself 2 questions. Is this something that the players want, and is this something that the hoard's owner would have in the hoard? Because creatures that have no reason to interact with giants, for example, they wouldn't have like a belt of giant strength in their hoard. When would they have gotten that? You gotta think about it realistically from the hoard owner's point of view. So if I determine, however, that this item isn't one that I want, then I will re-roll 1 time. Just once. Potion of Animal Friendship. And if I decide that I still don't want that in the hoard, if it's not thematically appropriate for the hoard owner, or if it's something the players don't want, then I stop rolling and I make an original magic item of the same rarity. And I just use the Dungeon Master's Guide regular rules for creating magic items for that. I don't make anything too overpowered. I make sure that everything is perfectly balanced, but still thematically appropriate to the hoard owner and something that the players would actually want and use. Okay, so once I have the magic items in the hoard, the next thing I do is I look at the total gold's worth of coins, art objects, and gems. And the first thing I think about with that is art objects. First, I figure out half of that value. That's going to be 146. Yeah, 146 gold is half of that number. So I try to find what the cheapest art object in the game is that doesn't go, or rather the most valuable art object in the game that doesn't go over that number. 146. Well, the cheapest art objects are 25 gold, and the second most is 250 gold. 250 is too high, so I am going to make an original 25 gold art object. And I'm going to make it something that's cute or cool or just thematically appropriate to the owner of the hoard. It's going to be something that they made themselves, something that one of their minions made, or something that one of their victims made that they wanted to keep, either because they thought it was cool or because it's a trophy. So like that knoll painting that I mentioned earlier, that's a real art object that I put into the treasure hoard of this knoll camp in the hoarder that the players never visited, and they probably never will at this point. So they're not going to get to see that, but it would, if they did get it, it would be worth 25 gold. So that's in that hoard. So once I figure out what kind of art object that I want, just one, and make it an original one, something that's cool and appropriate, something that maybe the players might not want to sell. Maybe they want to keep it. After that, I deduct the value of the art object from the gold total. So that leaves me with 268. Okay, then I cut that number in half again. So half of 268 is 134. And then I try to fill the hoard with as many gems that don't exceed that number as I can. And I will think about the creatures that are keeping this hoard. Like, if it's brutish creatures, like gnolls and goblins and orcs, they typically won't have anything like refined gems. They'll have cheap gems and poorly taken care of gems. Like, I don't just use the gemstones as they are written. I have two modifiers that I tend to apply to them. I'll say that one of them is cracked or inferior, or I'll say that one is pristine and superior, like it's built into a ring or a necklace or something, which won't count as an art object. It'll just count as a gem, because a gem is the valuable part. Right, and so once I have enough gems to fill that value, I figure out how valuable the gems were, total that up, and deduct it once again from the total gold's worth. Then after that, the remaining gold value is in coins. And once again, it will depend on the creature who owns the hoard. If it's an intelligent creature that lives in society, that gold will be consolidated into the least number of coins possible, something convenient for them. If it's an intelligent creature like a necromancer who regularly visits town to restock his spell components or whatever, then if he's got more than 10 gold left, it's going to be in the form of a platinum piece. But if it's creatures who like coins, like shiny things, like a dragon wormling or a group of gnolls, then I will have way more copper, just so that the pile of coins can be bigger. So I'll usually make over half of that remaining value in copper, and then over half of that remaining value in silver, and then the rest will be in gold. I typically won't give platinum pieces to lower tier creatures.
Well, yeah, because those sort of creatures aren't going in to consolidate those values.
And also because you can't get platinum on the CR0 to 4 treasure hoard anyway. Yeah, and that is how I do treasure hoards. Also, if I roll Electrum, I convert it into other coins because I hate Electrum.
I mean, the only problem with Electrum is just it doesn't even out with the other coins. Its value doesn't. It's like a $50, kind of, right?
Yeah, it's a $50. It's half of gold.
Yeah.
One more thing before I end my explanation of how I do treasure hoards.
Yeah.
Unless the creature that you're dealing with is particularly lawful and mechanical in their thought process, you're generally not going to have an amount of coins of any type that ends in a 0. So I always try to randomize the amounts a little bit. Like, even if I'm cutting things in half, like, since everything is divided by 10 and 100 and all that stuff, you typically end up with these weird rigidly even numbers, like exactly 2,300 copper. If you're going to use these numbers as they're written, just change it a little bit. Make that 2,278, and then change the silver to 1,107, and then the gold to 71. Just make them more realistic.
Well, maybe. I mean, I understand that point. It does make a more realistically feeling world to have the more varied values, but it does make bookkeeping harder. Just a little bit, tiny little bit.
But it makes the hoard more interesting. It makes it sound like it's actually a pile of coins that these goblins just dumped all the coins that they got into, and they're not even bothering to count them. They just want a big pile of shinies. What if it's someone intelligent like a necromancer who probably has most of his money in the bank? The amount of money that he keeps on his person will probably be a rigid number. Kind of like a person who keeps a bank in their home will typically only have dollar bills in it and not coins.
Right.
Maybe they might have coin rolls, but that's still a rigid number.
Right. Yeah. It still makes it more convenient to carry and store.
So consider the desires of the player characters and consider the nature of the one who owns the hoard. And your treasure hoards will be way more interesting. Player characters are actually, not player characters, players will engage with the hoard more. Like, the players found this, statue, a marble statuette of a dragon that was covered in rubies. I don't think you guys sold it.
Oh, yeah, I think Zaymot still has it.
Yeah, you guys had the opportunity to sell it, and you didn't because it's cool.
Yeah.
Which was my goal.
Mm-hmm. Right. I mean, I got rid of all the gemstones, but...
Which is an odd choice, considering gems are worth more than gold and they weigh less.
True. I mean, I could have just kept them, but I didn't want to.
I mean, yeah, that goes into the whole, like, hoard owner thing. Like, if a player character dies, their corpse is a treasure hoard.
Right, yeah.
And you're going to, if somebody else finds that corpse, the stuff you carry on your person is going to say a lot about who you were.
Yeah, because banking is not a very... It doesn't feel very good for adventurers to go bank and stuff.
Banking is a very modern concept. It's typically something that only happens in metropolises like Neverwinter.
Right.
And it's hard to do that if you're moving away from Neverwinter.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you gotta do that like by mail or something, like carrier pigeon. Like, have this pigeon bring me 100 platinum pieces. Just have it carry it in a bag. It definitely won't be intercepted.
Well, the best thing you could do is if you're like in the mid tier, like just getting level 5 or 6 or whatever, would be to have a consultant in the city and having some form of magical operation to teleport it to you when you need it. That's mostly what you would do. You'd hire like a mage to do that for you. Like, hey, buddy, can you send me like 5 gold? It's like right there, you know.
There is one more thing about my treasure hoards. I do put some more thought into what kind of gems are in the hoard, not just the condition of the gems, but if it's a creature that has particular interests, then they'll gravitate towards specific types of gems. Like an air elemental, for example, might prefer blue-colored gems, because blue is the color of the plane of air, it's the color of the sky.
You ever remember how you got money from random encounters in Earthbound?
I never played it.
Well, I want to mention this real quick because it's really cool. It's not D&D related, but I do want to say it. In Earthbound, when you kill enemies, right, they do have money values, but you don't get them from the fights. Instead, when you go into town to save by calling your dad, because you have to call your dad at the phone to save, he'll actually tell you, he's like, "Oh, son, you've been doing such a fantastic job. Here, have $200. Yeah, that's how you get money for the monsters. He sends them to you for beating shit up. Isn't that awesome?
He sends you $200 for beating people up.
Basically, yeah.
Also, how?
He just in modern cities, so he just sends an invoice to wherever you're at because your dad's rich. So he's like
by mail.
Oh yeah, I'm sure he calls the bank. I'm sure.
I don't know if did digital money exist when Earthbound came out.
Well, even if it didn't, you can still call the bank and be like, can you take this out? My son's going to be there or whatever, and he'd sign for it. Most likely, there's probably a way to do it. I'm just saying, it probably is a way.
Account transfers might have been a thing.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe. Just say, oh, hey, I have this much in my bank. Like, theoretically, take that money out of my account and put money into my son's account.
Mm-hmm. Right.
But you don't actually access your bank account.
No, you just get the money. Because magic. Like, how do you beat someone up with a yo-yo? It's the same sort of thing.
Anyway, so those are all 3 of our topics.
Why do I feel like we didn't really come to much of a consensus this time around?
Consensus on what?
I don't know. Like, I feel like usually when we get... Because I guess I'm just feeling more... Because last episode we ended with like this nice message to everybody. And this time it's like, oh, well, we talked about treasure hoards, and that was cool. I guess we did talk about Darkvision. Because we talked about Darkvision, we talked about treasure hoards, and we talked about... Crafting. Oh yeah, it's just because crafting fucking sucks. Yeah. And it doesn't feel like very good. We don't have any consensus about crafting.
Actually, if you want to, I can talk about Aluja for a bit. Do some shameless self-plugging for the tabletop RPG that isn't even on the internet in any form yet.
Wouldn't you prefer to have that like in a more, condensed video form? Like it's not just in...
Nah, I can hint at it. I mean, I've already hinted at it before.
Well, we're already running, what are we at? Like 1:30?
Over an hour.
Yeah. If you want to talk about it, you can do a few minutes. Sure. Go ahead.
I'm not going to spend long on it. I'm just going to say that in my tabletop RPG system, crafting is mostly just going to be DM adjudication, or GM adjudication. How long it takes and how difficult it is, and there will be skill checks involved. And it will be way more realistic, because you can just say, I'm going to write a book, and the DM can measure it in terms of how long it takes. Like, if he says, that might take a few months, so let's measure it in terms of months. And then he'll set a DC, maybe 20.
That's a good idea. So you do like days, weeks, months, years. It's kind of how it goes, and you go from there.
Generally, if the GM assumes that it's going to take at least more than 1 month, at least 2 months, then you just measure it in terms of months. Okay. If it will take at least 2 days, then you measure it in terms of days. And then you start making skill checks, starting with the original DC. So like DC 20, you make your check. If you fail that, you spend 1 month working on it. Then after the end of the second month, you make another check, but the DC has been reduced by 5. And the process ends when you beat the DC. So it gets easier with time, which represents your progress. And then once you finally beat the DC, you're done.
That is something that D&D 5e's crafting desperately needs, is a skill check associated with it to either speed up or slow down the process.
I mean, it already has, the tools already have proficiency associated with them. The idea of rolling tool checks wasn't a thing until Xanathars, and crafting still isn't involved.
I mean, yeah, wouldn't it just be so simple to be like, okay, I'm going to craft this thing. You have a certain period of time. After that period of time, you roll.
Yeah, okay. Roll intelligence Smith's tools.
Right. And if
you add your proficiency bonus because you're proficient with Smith's tools.
And if you fail, then it takes longer, and maybe even you burn up a portion of the materials, and you have to supply more if you wanted to. You know?
How much longer? Like, are we setting DCs now? Because we'll have to if you're rolling.
Or you could just say it doesn't take any longer, and again, you just have to supply more material. You could do that too.
But what's the DC?
Well, DC has to be set by somebody. Sorry. If you're going to make a check, it has to be a set DC. Probably by the rarity of the item, probably. Right? So common items will be like a 10, and then like it goes up from there.
That's the thing. Regular plate armor counts as mundane.
Okay, well, yeah, it shouldn't be that hard to make. I mean, the time is still going to be different depending on what you're doing, but I'm just saying, like...
I mean, I guess. I mean, when I was originally talking about plate armor crafting with Kaze, he said that a proficient enough blacksmith could make one of those in a week.
Yeah. I mean, a week is perfectly reasonable.
Yeah, so you could just...
The issue with plate armor is the fact that it's fucking expensive.
It is, but you can still get it for half price pretty early just by being proficient with Smith's tools. And if you're going to craft that in only 1 week, that's... The rest of the party is going to be more than willing to wait 1 week. They'll find something else to do.
Then how would you do it then? For plate armor specifically. Excluding everything else. Just plate armor.
In 3.5, the DC for crafting armor was equal to the amount of armor class it gave you. So like plate armor, the DC is 18. But just beating it one time wasn't enough. You had to both beat it and then multiply the DC by your check result to determine how many progress points you earned. And then once you've earned enough progress points, which is determined by the item's value, then you've succeeded in crafting it. Which, at low levels, makes crafting plate armor take even longer than it does in 5th edition, but at high levels makes it take less time.
So it just means you need a high level of proficiency to do it. Like, you need to have done it like your entire life and really like honed the skill in order to do it in any sort of reasonable time, right? Because that's the problem I have with it. There are mundane people out there making plate armor in reasonable amounts of time. You know, why are adventurers not the ones who are able to do that?
You know, maybe we're overthinking this.
Yeah.
750 gold? You guys are almost level 4 and you don't even have that much.
No, we're barely scraping by with 150.
Yeah, so if you have proficiency in Smith's tools and you're willing to spend a week of time, in-game time, you know, even with meteor hovering above your head, to craft a suit of plate armor, then go ahead. I mean, you took this tool proficiency, you're still spending a lot of gold for your level, and you're spending in-game time doing it.
Yeah, you're paying a lot of gold for, at most, you're going to get like a 2-point bonus to AC.
And you still had to beat the DC.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I mean, why were we so worried about it before? Like, this was the value, right? Because like you were afraid about getting the 750.
Well, mostly it was just because, like Wizards of the Coast, I don't really want low-level player characters having plate armor that early.
But with the way that you've designed stuff now, and the way I'll probably design stuff too, is having time limits makes it so much more difficult because you have to give up a lot of time to do it.
Yeah. You're sacrificing 10 days of the 30-day time limit that I gave you guys, and way more gold than you guys have earned so far. Yeah, it all kind of evens out. I mean, typically you're not going to get plate armor even with this little house water crafting until you're tier 2 anyway.
Yeah, so like, Why does it feel like we got more? Just it feels like we got more than that. Like not us, but like it feels like other groups get more money than that. I don't know why, because they're all pulling from the same treasure hoards, but I feel like other groups get more money than that.
I think other groups might just exaggerate how much money they get.
Okay.
Like maybe the DM is rolling too many treasure hoards.
I think the only thing we've actually bought this entire time. No, we did go with that one shopping spree. We got like a 10-foot pole and a bunch of torches and rations and stuff. Yeah, okay. All right, I think that's a much better place to end than what we had before. It feels better. And you got to talk about Illusia a little bit, which I'm happy about.
Yes,
which is cool.
I will be talking about Illusia a lot more once I get more stuff written up. Because right now, that's what's stopping me from working on it, is just finding the time to sit down and write it. I don't really have much time these days.
Yeah.
All right, so thank you all so very much for watching. Until next time, we'll be here in the darkness, quietly awaiting your return.